Before this story begins, take a moment to look closely at these images. What you're seeing are not recreations. They are real photographs captured during the moments you're about to learn about. Each frame was taken by someone who was there, standing in the middle of history as it unfolded. These images survived decades of time. Wars, fading archives, forgotten files. Yet they still carry the weight of the moment they captured. The faces, the places, the silence between events. All of it is real. In the next few minutes, we will step back into that moment in history. Not as a distant story, but as something once lived by real people. So as the story begins, remember, behind every historical event, there were ordinary individuals living through extraordinary times. This is their moment in history.
Beneath the quiet soil of northern China, an army waits. It does not move. It does not breathe. Yet it endures with a stillness that seems untouched by time. Thousands of soldiers stand in formation, as if paused in the final moment before battle. Their eyes are set forward, focused on an enemy that will never arrive. Horses stand ready. Chariots are aligned. Everything suggests movement, except nothing moves. What kind of ruler would command an army not for life, but for death? And what does power mean when it extends beyond the limits of the living? More than 2,000 years ago, long before the modern world took shape, something extraordinary was set into motion here, hidden beneath layers of earth, protected by silence and time. For centuries, it remained unseen. But when it was finally uncovered, it did more than reveal the past. It confronted it. Before China became a unified empire, the land was divided and unstable, shaped by nearly constant conflict. This period, known as the Warring States era, was defined by competition between rival kingdoms, each seeking control. Borders shifted often. Alliances formed and collapsed. Power was never secure. Land that once supported farming communities became contested ground. Metal once used for tools was forged into weapons. Daily life adapted to uncertainty. In villages across the plains, mornings began early. The air carried a sense of unease. Families worked the land while remaining, alert to distant movement, smoke. On the horizon, the faint echo of marching troops. Parents hoped to shield their children from conflict, but the sounds of war were never far away. There was no single authority, no shared identity, only the need to endure. Each state maintained its own system, its own laws, currency, and customs. But none were immune to disruption. Trust was fragile. Agreements rarely lasted. War was not occasional. It was continuous. And from this environment, a powerful idea began to take hold, that lasting peace could only come through total control. Not compromise, not balance, but complete dominance. In the western state of Qin, a young king came to power at the age of 13. His name was Zheng. In time, he would take on a new title, one that marked a turning point in history. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. From early on, his ambitions set him apart. Where others defended territory, he sought to eliminate division altogether. He did not see rival states as permanent structures, but as pieces of a larger whole waiting to be brought together. Under his leadership, Qin developed into a highly organized and effective military force. Campaigns were carefully planned. Armies moved with discipline. Victories were decisive. Cities fell. Leaders surrendered or were removed. Populations were absorbed into an expanding system. Gradually, the competing states disappeared. By 221 BCE, for the first time, China was unified under a single ruler. It was a transformation of immense scale. But unity did not necessarily bring peace. It brought order strict, centralized, and far-reaching. The new empire required consistency. Qin Shi Huang introduced sweeping reforms to standardize key aspects of daily life. Measurements were unified. Currency was regulated. Writing systems were aligned, allowing communication across regions. Even practical details, such as the width of cart axles, were standardized to ensure infrastructure functions smoothly across long distances. Existing defensive walls were linked together, forming an early version of what would later become the Great Wall. Road networks expanded, connecting distant regions and allowing for faster movement of people, goods, and authority. It was an impressive achievement, one that reflected careful planning and a clear vision of governance. But such scale came with demands, and those demands were placed on people. Large numbers of individuals were required to support the empire's projects. Farmers were reassigned. Laborists were organized. Prisoners were put to work. Entire communities contributed to construction efforts that reshaped the landscape. Mountains were cut through to build roads. Waterways were redirected through canals. Fortifications stretched across vast distances. Amid all this activity, another project began, one that remained largely hidden from public view. Its purpose was not widely known. Its scale was difficult to imagine, and it would outlast the empire itself. Near present-day Lebanon, work began on something unprecedented. The emperor was preparing not just for his life, but for what he believed would follow. At first, the project resembled a traditional royal tomb, large, detailed, and designed to honor a ruler's legacy. But it quickly became clear that this was something more. Qin Shi Huang did not see death as an endpoint. He believed his authority would continue beyond it. And if his rule was to continue, it would require protection. Skilled workers were brought together from across the empire. Craftsmen, engineers, and artists were given a singular task: to build an army. Not of living soldiers but of clay. What they created was remarkable. Full-sized figures, each one distinct. No two faces were identical. Expressions varied: calm, focused, resolute. Hairstyles and uniforms reflected rank and role. Armor was rendered with careful detail. These were not generic forms. They were individual representations. An entire force, recreated with precision. The figures were arranged in structured formations. Infantry stood at the front. Archers were positioned behind. Chariots were placed strategically. Officers appeared to oversee the ranks. Even the horses showed signs of tension, as though ready to move. Weapons were included: real bronze swords, spears, and crossbows, crafted with advanced techniques. In total, the site would contain thousands of soldiers, along with horses and chariots. And this was only part of a much larger complex. Historical accounts suggest the tomb itself was designed to reflect the empire. Rivers and landscapes were recreated underground. Ceilings were decorated to resemble the night sky. Structures were built to mirror palaces and towers. It was, in effect, a complete world beneath the surface. A reflection of power preserved in silence. The construction required immense effort. Workers labored for extended periods under demanding conditions. The scale of the project meant that many were involved over long stretches of time. Some accounts suggest that strict secrecy was enforced, and that not all who worked on the site were able to leave it. The emperor's control extended even to how his legacy would be protected. One can imagine a laborer, taken from a distant village, working deep below ground, day after day, shaping clay into human form. He may not have known the full purpose of his work, only that it was required. Around him, figures began to take shape, faces that seemed almost alive. He might have wondered whether anyone would ever see them, or whether they would remain hidden indefinitely. When Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BCE, the tomb was sealed. The army was left in place, unmoving, complete. Above ground, the empire began to change. Within a few years, the Qin dynasty came to an end, replaced by new leadership. But underground, nothing shifted. The figures remained exactly as they had been placed. For centuries, they stood undisturbed. Time moved on. Dynasties rose and declined. Cities expanded. New ideas took hold. The world changed in countless ways. But the Terracotta Army remained hidden beneath the earth, untouched and largely forgotten, until the 20th century. In 1974, a group of farmers in the region began digging a well. As they worked, their tools struck something solid. It was not stone, not bone. It was something shaped. As they uncovered fragments, a face emerged. Then part of a body. Then more pieces. What they had discovered would soon be recognized as one of the most significant archaeological finds of modern times. An entire army, preserved underground. As excavation efforts expanded, the scale of the site became clear. Rows of figures extended across large areas, each one positioned with intention. Many had been damaged over time: collapsed structures, environmental changes, and the passage of centuries had taken their toll. But enough remained to reveal the original design. Archaeologists worked carefully, restoring and studying the figures, piece by piece. Each discovery added to the understanding of how the site had been constructed and why. The warriors offered insight not just into military organization, but into a way of thinking. They reflected a system built on structure, hierarchy, and control. They also pointed to something more personal, a concern that extended beyond life itself. Qin Shi Huang had succeeded in unifying a vast territory, but like all rulers, he faced the limits of time. The army he commissioned suggests an attempt to extend influence beyond those limits. The discovery drew global attention. Researchers, historians, and visitors came to see the site firsthand. They studied the techniques used in construction. They examined the variation in the figures. They considered the scale of coordination required to bring it all together. The Terracotta Army became a symbol of both innovation and ambition. At the same time, it raised questions. Such a project required significant resources and labor. It reflected not only vision, but also authority, the ability to mobilize people and materials on a vast scale. It stands as a reminder of what centralized power can achieve, and what it demands. The site has since become a protected cultural landmark. It is preserved, studied, and carefully presented to the public. Even now, much of the larger tomb complex remains unopened. Concerns about preservation continue to guide decisions about how and whether to explore further. At the center, the emperor's burial chamber remains sealed. Above ground, visitors walk past rows of silent figures. They stand as they have for over 2 millennia, watching, unchanged, in a world defined by constant movement and innovation. The Terracotta Army offers a different perspective. It speaks to permanence and to limits. It reflects a belief in continuity, even beyond death. And it invites reflection on the nature of power. Because no matter how extensive, no system can fully escape time. No structure can last unchanged forever. Even the most ambitious creations eventually become part of history. The Terracotta Army endures not only as an archaeological discovery, but as a record of intention. It preserves a moment when one ruler sought to shape not just his world, but what came after it. And as those figures continue to stand in silence, they leave behind a question that still resonates. Not about what was built, but about why, and what it means to seek permanence in a world that never stops changing.